The unexpected war, it all began with a whisper, an unnoticed disturbance in the vastness of the galaxy. No one expected that a small, seemingly insignificant planet, Earth, would ignite the spark that would lead to the Deathworld Alliance's greatest crisis. But that whisper would soon become a roar, shaking the foundations of power in the galaxy. For centuries, the Deathworld Alliance had ruled the stars, a coalition of the galaxy's most savage, war-hardened species. They had crushed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. No one had ever dared challenge their might. No one except one small species: humanity. The first signs of Earth's involvement in the war were subtle. At first, it wasn't even clear if the humans were simply playing a part in the grand game, or if they had something more dangerous in mind. But when the Deathworld Alliance invaded a peaceful world on the edge of known space, something unexpected happened. A single human fleet, small with limited resources, faced down the might of the Krathor, the Alliance's fiercest military faction. The battle was supposed to be a slaughter, a mere footnote in the Galactic War. The Krathor were a race of towering, muscle-bound warriors, known for their brutal tactics and their unrelenting thirst for violence. They had crushed planets with ease. But this time was different. The humans fought with a fury no one had anticipated. Ships maneuvered in ways that defied the Alliance's expectations. The humans used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strategies, and surprise attacks that turned the tide of battle. Within hours, the Krathor were on the back foot, struggling to understand what had just happened. For the first time in centuries, the Deathworld Alliance felt the sting of defeat. It wasn't just the Krathor who were caught off guard. Word of humanity's unexpected victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The other factions of the Deathworld Alliance, like the ruthless Vikar and the cunning Zathar, immediately began preparing for what they considered an inevitable escalation. But they weren't prepared for the humans' response. Humanity didn't retreat after their victory. They didn't sit idle, waiting for the Alliance to regroup. They fought back harder. The small, underdog fleet that had once been laughed at by the galaxy's more advanced civilizations now became a symbol of defiance. The humans were no longer passive players. They had crossed the line, and now they were playing for keeps. As the Krathor reeled from their losses, the Deathworld Alliance called for an emergency summit. The room was filled with representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy: warlords, generals, and strategists who had crushed countless worlds. They had faced every kind of threat imaginable, but they were united in their disbelief. Earth had dared challenge them, and worse yet, it had succeeded. Vikar, the leader of the Vroth, a ruthless insectoid species known for their technological superiority, was the first to speak. His voice, though calm, sent chills through the room. "This will not stand. Humanity is a threat, and we will eradicate them before they become a bigger problem." But there was a problem. The other factions in the room were not as united as Vikar had hoped. Some species were reluctant to dive into another conflict, especially one that might spread across the galaxy. The idea of humans causing so much disruption was unthinkable. Vikar might have been ready for war, but others weren't so sure. At that very moment, Jackson Hayes, the commander of the human fleet, was unaware of the chaos that his actions had ignited. Standing aboard his flagship, the Vanguard, he was giving orders for the next series of attacks on Krathor supply lines. Humanity had only just begun to understand its place in this galactic war. But one thing was becoming clear: they were not about to bow down to the Deathworld Alliance. As Jackson sat in the command center, a message came in, a warning from Earth's top intelligence unit. They had intercepted a transmission between the Deathworld Alliance warlords, discussing the human threat. The message was chilling. The humans have done the impossible. They have defied us, and now they must be destroyed. It was then that Jackson realized the full scope of what had been set in motion. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They had become the center of the galaxy's attention, and every faction, every warlord, was now focused on them. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was going to be a war for the future of the galaxy itself. The screen in front of Jackson flickered, showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared on the map, indicating Deathworld Alliance ships and their advancing positions. Jackson clenched his fists. The real war had just begun. As he looked out the window, staring at the stars, he could see the promise of humanity's future, a future where Earth would not only survive but thrive, a future where humanity would prove that they were more than just another species to be crushed under the boot of the Deathworld Alliance. He knew the coming days would be filled with battles. But he was no longer worried. They had the one thing the Deathworld Alliance didn't expect: unity, determination, and an unwillingness to back down. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once. It would not make that mistake again. The tides. Of war, the galaxy had never seen anything like this. The Deathworld Alliance, a coalition of the most brutal and advanced species the stars had ever known, had never been challenged like this before. The first defeat at the hands of the humans was only the beginning. Now the Alliance was bent on ensuring that Earth would never threaten their dominion again. But things were no longer as simple as they once were. As Jackson Hayes sat in the command center aboard the Vanguard, staring at the glowing map of the galaxy, he knew that this war would define the future of humanity. The Deathworld Alliance was relentless, but Earth had something they didn't: heart, courage, and a deep need to protect everything they held dear. It had been only a few weeks since the Crathor fleet had been thrown back, but the effects of that single battle rippled through the galaxy. Humanity had caught the eye of every faction, from the insectoid Vicar to the mysterious shadowy Zathar. Earth was no longer a small, insignificant dot in the vast expanse of space. It had become a symbol of rebellion, a new force that couldn't be ignored. Jackson turned to his crew, who were working tirelessly in the command center, monitoring every incoming signal, every fleet movement. "We need to strike first," Jackson said with grim determination. "We can't afford to sit back and wait. The Alliance won't just forget what we've done. We have to take the fight to them." His voice was steady, but the weight of the situation was heavy on his shoulders. His fleet was small compared to the vast forces of the Deathworld Alliance, but it was fierce, adaptable, and driven by something no alien force had: humanity's unyielding will to survive. He had to keep them fighting, keep them united. He knew that if Earth's forces could strike at the heart of the Deathworld Alliance, they might have a chance at stopping the tide of destruction that was already beginning to sweep over the galaxy. The problem was that the Crathor weren't the only threat humanity faced. The Vicar had been watching their every move, and now they were preparing to launch a counterattack. Their ships were sleek and deadly, equipped with cutting-edge technology that far surpassed anything humanity had. But Jackson wasn't worried. He knew humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology. It was its ability to adapt, to learn, and to turn the impossible into something achievable. Back on Earth, the situation was equally dire. The war wasn't just happening in the stars. It was happening on the planet itself. The Deathworld Alliance had begun to target Earth's colonies, attacking mining operations, research facilities, and military outposts, hoping to cripple humanity's war effort before it could truly take off. But Earth had its own secret weapon: the human spirit. When the news of the first human victory reached the colonies, it ignited something that the Alliance could never have predicted: unity. Earth's people, from every corner of the world, rallied together. Civilians volunteered to build ships, soldiers enlisted for the war effort, and scientists worked day and night to develop new technologies to counter the Alliance's advanced weaponry. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't divided by politics, religion, or culture. They were united by a single burning desire: to protect their planet, their families, and their future. As Jackson's fleet prepared for the next phase of their campaign, he sat down with his most trusted advisors, Commander Sophia Winters, a brilliant tactician, and Lieutenant Ezra Kai, a young pilot who had quickly become one of the best fighters in the fleet. Sophia studied the data on the holographic table in front of them. "We're not just up against the Crathor anymore. The Vicar are mobilizing, and I'm afraid they're planning something big," Ezra, ever the optimist, leaned forward. "We've beaten them once. We can do it again." Jackson nodded but knew that the situation was far more complicated than it seemed. This wasn't just a war of firepower. It was a war of ideology. The Deathworld Alliance believed that might made right, that they had the right to conquer and enslave, and that no one, especially a species as young and fragile as humanity, should ever challenge their rule. But humanity believed something different. They believed in freedom, in choice, and in fighting for what was right. That belief, that fierce drive to protect what they loved, was their true weapon. The first wave of Vicar ships arrived on the outer rim of the galaxy just days after Jackson's meeting. The Vicar had developed new weapons that could obliterate entire fleets in a single strike. Their ships were equipped with plasma turrets that could cut through armor like a hot knife through butter. The humans were outmatched and outgunned, but they weren't outwitted. Jackson called for an immediate response. "We know what they're capable of, but they don't know what we can do," he said, determination in his eyes. "We fight smart, not just hard. This time we outmaneuver them." The battle began at dawn, a fast-moving, high-stakes conflict that would set the stage for the next phase of the war. As the Vicar forces descended upon humanity's fleet, Jackson gave the signal. In an instant, the human fleet split, with smaller, faster ships darting in and out of the enemy's range. They were using tactics the Vicar hadn't anticipated. Humans were making impossible moves, diving through asteroid fields, weaving between space debris, and hitting the Vicar with precision strikes that left their enemies scrambling to catch up. Jackson's strategy was simple but effective: keep the Vicar off balance. If they couldn't get a clear shot, they couldn't destroy humanity's fleet. The battle raged for hours, with explosions lighting up the darkness of space. But by the end of it, the Vicar had suffered a crushing defeat. Jackson's fleet, though battered, remained intact, and the human victory was broadcast across the galaxy. As the Vicar retreated, Jackson stood at the helm of the Vanguard, staring out into the vast expanse of stars. The galaxy had just learned a powerful lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. The humans had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful warlords in the galaxy. But the victory was bittersweet. The Deathworld Alliance would not rest until humanity was crushed, and now, the real war was about to begin. The unseen threat. The victory against the Vicar had come at a cost, but it was also a wake-up call to the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They had proven they could fight back, even against some of the most dangerous species in existence. But while the galaxy was focused on humanity's victories, something darker, something far more dangerous, was looming in the shadows. The Deathworld Alliance was not composed of just brutish warriors and advanced technology. Beneath the surface of their empire was something more insidious, a force that went beyond sheer strength. It was intelligence, strategy, and now that very intelligence had turned its gaze upon Earth. For weeks, the humans had been on the offensive, striking at supply lines, ambushing enemy fleets, and launching surprise attacks that left the Krathor and Vicar reeling. However, amidst the chaos, Jackson Hayes could sense that something wasn't right. His fleet, though victorious, was growing, increasingly stretched. Supplies were dwindling and his soldiers were starting to show signs of exhaustion. One night, as the Vanguard made its way back to the human command base on the distant moon of Orion, Jackson received an encrypted message from Earth's Central Command. It was a warning. The message read, "We've detected something. It's not a fleet. It's something else. We think it's a weapon, something the Deathworld Alliance has been hiding. We don't know what it is yet, but we believe it's coming. For you. Prepare for the worst." Jackson's heart sank. For all their victories, for all their progress, humanity was about to face a threat unlike any they had encountered before. The Deathworld Alliance had kept secrets, and now those secrets were about to come to light. He immediately called for a fleet-wide meeting, gathering his senior commanders and tacticians. The room was tense, the air thick with the unspoken fear of the unknown. We're about to face something we can't predict, Jackson said, his voice steady but firm. The Alliance is holding something back, and it's coming for us. We need to be ready. Commander Sophia Winters, who had earned a reputation as one of the best tacticians in the human fleet, leaned forward, analyzing the incoming intelligence. We've been pushing the Deathworld Alliance back, but their leadership is cunning. They won't just come at us with brute force. They've been planning something for a long time. We've underestimated them. As Jackson mulled over the implications of the message, Lieutenant Ezra Kai, who had become the heart and soul of the fleet's fighter pilots, spoke up. What if it's not a weapon? What if it's something different? Something we've never seen before? Everyone in the room went silent. It was a disturbing thought. What if the Alliance had found a way to turn the tide of the war in ways that humans couldn't comprehend? What if it's not just a weapon? Jackson repeated softly, as if to give weight to Ezra's words. What if it was something far worse than anything they had prepared for? Days passed and the human fleet prepared for the unknown. Tension grew in the ranks as rumors spread. Some believed the Alliance had found a way to unleash a biological weapon. Others thought it was a new type of superweapon that could destroy entire planets in one blast. Jackson's mind was consumed with the possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. Humanity's fleet was stationed near Calliope Station, a massive space station that served as a strategic hub for human operations. Jackson stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, gazing at the deep void of space. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. He had led his people through countless battles, but this one felt different. The very air seemed charged with an eerie sense of anticipation. Suddenly, the station's communications system blared to life. It was a distress signal from one of the outer colonies. Mayday, Mayday, we're under attack. Something is here. We need help. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving behind nothing but static. Jackson's heart raced. What the hell was that? He muttered, barely above a whisper. Sophia quickly checked the station's systems. It's coming from the Aurora outpost on the far side of the colony. We've lost contact with them. They're gone, sir. Prepare the fleet, Jackson ordered, his voice sharp. We need to move out now. The Vanguard and the rest of the fleet surged forward, racing to the Aurora outpost. As they neared the outpost's location, the ominous feeling in the pit of Jackson's stomach grew stronger. The stars around them seemed to grow darker, the silence of space broken only by the hum of the engines. When they arrived at Aurora, there was nothing left but wreckage. The outpost, a once thriving research facility, was now nothing more than twisted metal and floating debris. But it wasn't the destruction that unnerved Jackson. It was the eerie silence that hung in the air. The absence of life. There's no sign of any survivors, Sophia reported, her voice grim. The station's systems are all down. It's as if they just vanished. Then, out of nowhere, a massive energy pulse shot through the vastness of space, sending ripples through the very fabric of the void. The fleet's shields flared brightly, absorbing the shockwave. Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. What the hell was that? Ezra asked, his voice shaky. But Jackson knew the answer. They had just encountered the Alliance's greatest weapon. The energy pulse was like nothing they had ever seen. It wasn't a weapon, they could tell that much. It was something alive, a presence in space, something alien, something that had been waiting. Jackson gritted his teeth. Prepare for a counterstrike. Get me a tactical scan of the area. We're going to find out exactly what we're dealing with. But in the back of his mind, the truth was beginning to settle in. Humanity was about to face its most deadly adversary yet. And this time, the enemy wasn't just an army. It was something far worse, an unknown force that had been hidden in the shadows for too long. The awakening. The eerie silence of the Aurora outpost hung over Jackson Hayes as he stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out into the cold abyss of space. The wreckage of the outpost floated aimlessly, a grim reminder that humanity was now facing an unknown and unimaginable enemy. The energy pulse had faded, but the chilling sense of something watching them lingered, like a predator silently circling its prey. Jackson had seen countless battles, had faced overwhelming odds and unimaginable danger, but this was different. It felt wrong, like the galaxy itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. "We can't just sit here waiting for it to come back," Commander Sophia Winters said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. She stood beside Jackson, studying the holographic display of the wreckage. "We need to know what we're up against." Jackson turned to her, his mind racing. "I agree, but whatever this thing is, it's not something we can just fight head-on." He paused for a moment, thinking. "We need to find out what it is, where it came from, and what it wants. Only then can we figure out how to stop it." Sophia nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll send out a probe to scan the area for any residual energy signatures. Maybe we can trace it back to its origin." Jackson watched as she issued the orders. The Vanguard wasn't the only ship in the fleet, but it was the most advanced and the most capable of withstanding the unknown threat. The rest of the fleet remained in formation, their weapons primed and ready for whatever came next. Hours passed, in silence as the probe made its way through the debris field, collecting data. When the report came back, it was not what they had expected. "Sir, the probe has detected an anomaly," the technician on the comms reported. It's not a ship, and it's not natural. We're picking up a massive energy source that seems to be alive." Jackson's blood ran cold. "Alive?" he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. He knew that humanity had only scratched the surface of the galaxy's mysteries, but to face something organic, a living weapon created by the Deathworld Alliance, was unthinkable. Sophia was the first to react. "Could it be a bioweapon?" Jackson didn't answer immediately. A bioweapon wasn't out of the question. The Deathworld Alliance was known for its ruthless experimentation with alien biology, but this was something different. This felt ancient, primal. Something far older than any of the species in the Deathworld Alliance. Suddenly the ship's alarm blared, cutting through their thoughts. "Incoming!" a voice shouted over the comms. "Energy surge detected, directly ahead." Jackson's heart raced. "Brace for impact." The Vanguard lurched as the ship's shields flared brightly. The entire crew was thrown against their seats as the ship absorbed the shockwave. A deep, bone-rattling hum reverberated through the hull as the Vanguard rocked. Violently, Sophia gripped the edge of the console, her face tense. "What is it?" "It's the energy signature," the technician reported. "It's growing stronger. It's like it's feeding off of us. We need to move fast, or we won't survive this." Jackson's mind raced as he surveyed the situation. The energy pulse wasn't just a weapon, it was an entity. Alive. And it was feeding on the energy from their ship, growing stronger with each passing second. The more they resisted, the stronger it became. "Get us out of here now." Jackson barked. "Set a course for the nearest jump point. We can't stay in this field any longer." The crew scrambled to follow his orders, but it was too late. The energy pulse surged once more, this time with a force that pushed the Vanguard to the brink. The ship's hull groaned as it was ripped from its course, its engines sputtering. Jackson's eyes widened as the lights on the bridge flickered. Full power to the engines, but it wasn't enough. The pulse hit again, and this time there was no resistance. The Vanguard was thrown off course, spiraling uncontrollably into the abyss. Planet Arrakis, deep in the heart of Deathworld Alliance. Territory stood in stark contrast to the cold void of space. Its surface was barren, its atmosphere thick with toxic gases. This was a world that had seen the birth of countless weapons of mass destruction, but none like the one that now stalked the galaxy. The Vakar were the first to notice the arrival of the Vanguard as it fell from the skies, its crippled engines sputtering helplessly. Their sensors tracked the ship's descent, and soon, the Krathor warships began to converge on the site. "It's here," a deep voice echoed through the command center of the Krathor flagship. "The living weapon is near." The Vakar had been preparing for this moment for years. They had carefully cultivated their most terrifying creation, a weapon that could break the very spirit of any foe. The Deathworld Alliance had not just created a machine to fight. It had created a weapon designed to prey on fear, on despair, on the soul itself. As the Vanguard's wreckage smoldered on the surface of Arrakis, the ship's last transmission sent a chilling message into the galaxy. It's alive, it's here. The Deathworld Alliance had awakened their most devastating weapon, and now the universe would learn what it meant to face the unimaginable. The beast unleashed, the Vanguard crashed violently onto the barren, toxic surface of Arrakis, its hull scraping against the jagged, rocky terrain as it skidded to a stop. The once proud warship, now broken and lifeless, lay in a smoldering heap of twisted metal and scorched earth. Inside, the surviving crew members were battered and disoriented, but miraculously alive. Jackson Hayes woke up to the sound of alarms, blaring and the faint scent of burning electronics. His head throbbed as he slowly pushed himself up from the floor, his hands shaking as he grabbed the console for support. The bridge was in ruins. Sparks flew from the damaged control panels, and the lights flickered in a sickly rhythm. "Status report!" he shouted, his voice hoarse but urgent. He struggled to clear the haze of pain from his mind. Commander Sophia Winters was the first to respond. She had a gash on her forehead, and her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "We're alive, sir, but not for long. The crash compromised our life support systems. The external environment's toxic, and if we don't get the engines back online, we're stuck here." Jackson's eyes narrowed. They were on Arrakis, the heart of the Deathworld Alliance's territory, and yet he had a far more pressing concern. The energy pulse. "It's still here," he muttered, looking out the shattered window to the blood-red sky. He could feel the oppressive weight of the planet bearing down on him, as if the very ground beneath them was alive, aware of their presence. "Sophia, what's the status of the rest of the fleet?" Jackson asked, his eyes scanning the room, looking for any sign of movement. The fleet had been forced into a hasty retreat after the energy pulse overwhelmed their systems, and now they were stranded. "The fleet is scattered, sir," she replied, her voice tight with concern. "The energy pulse knocked out our communication systems. We're completely cut off. We'll need to get the engines back up before we can even think about contacting anyone." But Jackson wasn't focused on that. His attention was drawn to something far more sinister, an unknown presence. The Vanguard's sensors, though damaged, were still picking up irregular readings. Someone, was on the surface of Arrakis. Moving. Waiting. Before he could voice his thoughts, a low, guttural rumble echoed through the broken hull. The ground beneath them trembled, and the lights on the ship flickered once more, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "What the hell was that?" Sophia demanded, her hand instinctively going for her sidearm. Jackson turned to face her, his face hardening. "I think we've just awakened something." The ship groaned, as if it too felt the presence of what was approaching. The Deathworld Alliance had always been ruthless, but Jackson now realized that the terror they had unleashed on this world was not just a weapon. It was an entity, a living nightmare. The hum of energy grew louder, vibrating through the ship. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, knowing what was coming but unable to stop it. "Everyone get to the escape pods," Jackson barked, his command slicing through the tension in the room. "We're not staying on this planet any longer. Move!" But just as the crew began to scramble, the entire ship suddenly lurched again, throwing everyone off balance. A piercing, otherworldly scream echoed across the surface of Arrakis, a sound so horrifying that it sent chills down their spines. It was the scream of something alive, something in pain. And yet there was an undeniable sense of malevolent purpose in it. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. "It's alive," he whispered, his mind struggling to process the impossible truth. "The weapon? It's not just a weapon, it's a living entity, and it's coming for us." The ground rumbled again, this time with such force that it rattled the Vanguard's already damaged structure. The entire ship tilted to one side as if it was caught in the grip of something enormous. Then, in a flash, the energy pulse hit again. Stronger than before, and this time it was directly aimed at them. Sophia grabbed Jackson's arm, her grip firm and resolute. We can't outrun it. We need to get inside, get to the core of the planet. We need to know what we're facing. There's no time, Jackson growled, his face darkening. We need to get off this planet now. But before they could make another move, the ground beneath them exploded and a creature, an enormous writhing mass of tendrils, glowing eyes, and scales erupted from the soil. It was unlike anything Jackson had ever seen, even in the deepest nightmares of the galaxy. It was the culmination of everything the Deathworld Alliance had been hiding. This is it, Jackson muttered, his eyes locked on the monster that loomed before them. This is the weapon. The creature was at least 3 stories tall, its skin dark and metallic, shifting like liquid as it moved. Its eyes were a sickly yellow, glowing with an intelligence that was both ancient and primal. The energy pulses they had been feeling were coming from this monster, its very presence distorting the air around them. It was alive. It was hunting them. Jackson felt the weight of his decision crush him. The entire human fleet was miles away, scattered and isolated. He had no backup, no reinforcements, just him, his crew, and a planet full of monsters. With a roar that shattered the air, the creature launched forward. Its massive tendrils lashed out, snaking toward the vanguard like a serpent. Jackson had no choice now. Fight, he yelled, drawing his weapon and charging into the chaos. Fight like hell. The crew rallied, but they knew the odds were slim. The creature, the weapon, was unstoppable. But Jackson was no stranger to impossible odds. This was their fight for survival. The wrath of Arrakis. The vanguard shook violently as the massive, writhing creature slammed into the hull, its glowing tendrils tearing through the metal like tissue paper. The crew scrambled in all directions, their weapons drawn, their hearts racing with fear and adrenaline. There was no time to plan, no time for hesitation. Jackson Hayes stood at the center of the chaos, his weapon raised, his voice cutting through the panic. "Hold the line," he shouted. "If we don't stop it now, we won't have a chance to escape." The creature's scream echoed across the broken ship, its distorted voice more of a howl than anything human or alien. It was an abomination of nature, a living weapon born from the twisted science of the Deathworld Alliance. Its glowing eyes fixed on Jackson as it slowly advanced, its body coiling and undulating like a snake. "We need to disable its energy core," Sophia Winters shouted, her voice barely audible over the shrill screeching of the creature. She fired a shot at one of its tendrils, but the bullet ricocheted off its metallic skin. "There's no way we're taking this thing down with conventional weapons." Jackson's mind raced. They were outmatched. The creature was far too powerful. The energy pulses it emitted seemed to block their attempts to fire at its weak points, its defenses more advanced than anything they had encountered before. "Get to the lower decks," Jackson ordered. "We'll use the ship's systems to fight back. We're not going down without a fight." Sophia nodded, and the crew quickly split into groups, heading for the engineering bay where they could access the Vanguard's power systems. The odds were against them, but the only thing they could rely on now was the ingenuity of humanity's finest engineers. Meanwhile, Jackson turned back to face the creature, which had fully emerged from the wreckage, its massive form blocking the view of the sky. The ground trembled beneath its weight as it slithered forward, its tendrils swiping through the wreckage like an enraged beast. It was gaining strength from the planet itself, the very energy of Arrakis feeding its unnatural existence. Jackson gritted his teeth and charged forward. "We may be outnumbered, but we've got something they don't. The will to survive." Jackson and the crew engaged in a desperate fight against the creature. They realized the true nature of the weapon they were up against. It wasn't just a mindless predator. It was intelligent, alive in a way that no machine could ever be. It was a weapon designed to adapt and learn from its enemies, a nightmare that couldn't be destroyed by conventional means. Inside the engineering bay, the crew worked frantically to restore the Vanguard's power systems. The screens flickered, and the hum of the engines grew louder as they struggled to reroute power. Lieutenant Maria Scott, the ship's lead engineer, cursed under her breath as sparks flew from an exposed conduit. "We've got a major power fluctuation," she shouted, slapping the emergency shutoff button. "I can't stabilize it. The creature's energy pulse is overriding everything." Sophia, who had followed her into the engineering bay, ran up to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. "We need to get the power back online or we're all dead. Jackson's counting on us." Maria looked at her face pale and drenched in sweat. "I can't do it alone. We need to overload the core, but we don't have the time to set up proper safeguards." Sophia grabbed a plasma cutter from the nearby tools, setting to work on the panel. "Just do it, Maria. We have to try." Maria hesitated for a moment before nodding. Together, they rigged the system to release a massive burst of energy, hoping to overload the creature's defenses. The plan was reckless, dangerous, and could very well destroy the Vanguard in the process, but they had no other choice. Jackson and the others were counting on them. Back outside, the battle raged on. Jackson, soaked in sweat and blood, dodged the creature's twisting tendrils. "Come on," he shouted, unloading another volley of rounds into the creature's armored hide. The shots had little effect, but it was enough to keep its attention on him. "Sophia, where the hell are you?" Just then, a booming roar filled the air. "Now, Jackson!" Sophia's voice crackled through his comms. "Get to the ship's core, we're ready!" Jackson's eyes widened. "Do it now!" With the last of his strength, Jackson sprinted toward the center of the ship. The creature, enraged by the distraction, pursued him relentlessly, its massive tendrils lashing out. The ground beneath Jackson's feet cracked and splintered as he ran, but he never slowed. His only thought was to reach the core before it was too late. He burst into the central chamber of the Vanguard, where the energy core pulsed ominously. The creature's roar was growing louder, closer. The ship was about to be destroyed, and humanity's last hope was about to flicker out. "Maria, Sophia," Jackson shouted as he reached the core. "Is it ready?" Sophia's voice crackled over the comms. "We're going to overload the core. Get clear." Jackson didn't hesitate. He ran toward the activation switch, his pulse hammering in his chest. He slammed his hand onto the control panel, activating the overload sequence. The Vanguard shuddered violently as the energy buildup intensified. The creature's tendrils crashed through the walls, reaching for him, but Jackson was already moving. The ground split open beneath him, and he felt the tremors ripple through the ship. As the overload sequence completed, a blinding light filled the chamber. Boom! The ship exploded in a blinding flash of energy. The blast sent shockwaves across the surface of Arrakis, obliterating everything in its path, including the creature. The force of the explosion sent Jackson flying, his body thrown into the air like a rag doll. When Jackson regained consciousness, the world around him was nothing but a haze of smoke and fire. The Vanguard was gone, reduced to a pile of molten metal. The ground was scorched, and the once terrifying creature that had hunted them was nothing but a smoldering wreck. He forced himself to his feet, his head spinning. "Sophia? Maria?" he croaked into his comms, but there was no answer. Through the smoke and debris, he saw a figure approaching him. Sophia. She was battered, bloodied, but alive. She gave him a small, weary smile. "We did it, Jackson." He nodded, but his eyes scanned the horizon. Knowing that the war was far from over, they had won this battle, but the Deathworld Alliance was far more powerful and dangerous than they had ever imagined. Humanity had just stepped onto the stage of a much larger conflict. The aftermath. The explosion had ripped through the heart of the Vanguard, sending a shockwave that had shaken the very core of Arrakis. But Jackson Hayes, Sophia Winters, and the surviving crew members were still alive, battered but breathing. The wasteland they found themselves in was a haunting sight. Blackened earth, jagged rocks, and the remnants of the once proud ship now scattered in a twisted heap of smoldering metal. The Deathworld Alliance's monstrous weapon was no more, but the cost of victory had been staggering. They had lost their ship, they had lost their comrades, and perhaps most devastating of all, they had no idea where the rest of the human fleet was. "Sophia? Maria?" Jackson's voice was hoarse as he slowly pushed himself up from the scorched ground. His hands were bloodied, his body covered in bruises. His mind was racing, trying to comprehend everything that had happened in such a short amount of time. Sophia appeared from the smoke, her face streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes still burning with determination. "We made it," she said, her voice rough but resolute. "But this isn't over, not by a long shot." Jackson nodded, his gaze scanning the horizon. He could see the silhouette of the Deathworld Alliance's distant warships above, slowly circling like vultures waiting for their moment to strike. They hadn't noticed the explosion. Not yet. But they would. "We need to get out of here," Jackson said, his tone grim. "If the fleet's still out there, we need to find them before those ships detect us." Sophia crouched beside him, checking her weapon and equipment. "We'll need to rely on what's left of our supplies, and whatever we can, scrounge from the wreckage." Maria, who had been inspecting the ruins of the Vanguard, looked up, her face serious. "I've salvaged enough to get a small shuttle working. We'll be able to get off this planet. But the moment we take off, the Deathworld Alliance will know we're alive." Jackson stood up slowly, clenching his fists. "I don't care. We fight until the last drop of blood. This is our war now." The crew moved quickly, rallying together and salvaging what little they could. The shuttle that Maria had managed to get operational was a small, heavily damaged transport, but it would have to do. They had no other choice. As they prepared to leave the surface of Arrakis, the distant hum of the Deathworld Alliance's warships grew louder, their weapon systems online, scanning for any signs of life. The crew worked in a tense silence, knowing that the moment they launched they would be marked. "We're almost ready," Maria said, her voice tight as she worked on the shuttle's main console. "Just need a few more seconds to stabilize the engines." "Hurry," Jackson urged, his eyes scanning the sky. He could see the dark shadows of the enemy ships approaching, their ominous shapes cutting through the smoky sky. "We don't have much time." With a final hiss of static, Maria slammed her hand down on the console. "Engines online, let's go." The crew rushed into the shuttle, scrambling for their seats. Jackson took the pilot's seat, his hands trembling as he gripped the controls. The shuttle lifted off the ground, its engines sputtering to life. The moment it rose above the wreckage of the Vanguard, the Deathworld Alliance's ships turned toward them. The ship's communications console crackled to life, and a chilling voice came over the comms. "Human survivors, you are being tracked. Surrender now or we will obliterate your vessel." Jackson didn't flinch. He grabbed the throttle and slammed it forward. "Not today," he muttered under his breath. He wasn't about to surrender, not after everything they had fought for. Not after all the lives lost. The shuttle accelerated, the planet's atmosphere pushing back as they blasted into the sky. The Deathworld Alliance's ships gave chase, their weapons coming online, bright beams of energy lighting up the atmosphere like lightning. "Incoming fire!" Sophia shouted from the rear compartment, her eyes wide. "They're not going to let us go!" Jackson gritted his teeth. The shuttle bucked under the pressure of the enemy's fire, the shields flickering under the assault. "Hold on," he yelled, slamming the shuttle's maneuvering thrusters. The shuttle banked sharply, dodging a barrage of laser fire. The deadly beam streaked past, narrowly missing them, but one of the shots clipped the shuttle's wing, causing a violent shudder. "We're losing power to the left engine," Maria yelled, her voice strained. "I've got this," Jackson snapped, his hands flying across the controls as he pushed the shuttle into a roll to avoid another volley. The shuttle's damaged wing flared up with sparks, but they were still moving. "We're not out yet," Jackson muttered to himself, gritting his teeth as he saw the massive Deathworld Alliance warship closing in, its guns primed for a final strike. Suddenly the sensors beeped wildly, alerting them to a new, unexpected presence, something larger than the enemy ships. "What the hell is that?" Sophia asked, peering out the window. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. "A reinforcement fleet, and it's human." The unmistakable silhouette of a human battle fleet emerged from behind a nearby moon, its weapons primed and shields flashing. The Alliance's ships faltered, momentarily thrown off by the new threat. The human ships locked onto the enemy with terrifying precision. The Deathworld Alliance ships hesitated, then began to retreat, sensing that they had been outmaneuvered. The human fleet, with its superior firepower, now had the advantage. "We're saved," Maria exclaimed, her voice full of disbelief and relief. Jackson felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, but it didn't last long. There was still work to do, still a war to fight. The human fleet quickly moved into position around the small shuttle, forming a protective cordon. As the shuttle coasted into their safe zone, the Deathworld Alliance's ships vanished into the distance, retreating for now, but Jackson knew it wasn't over. "We've made it," Sophia said quietly, looking out at the massive fleet that surrounded them. "Not yet," Jackson replied, his voice firm. "This is just the beginning."